I was scraping dried oatmeal out of a ceramic bowl in the office break room sink when Richard's voice carried down the hallway, smooth, congratulatory, just loud enough to make sure everyone heard it. He was praising Jason again, probably for the vision deck he presented that morning, the one built on projections I'd corrected at 11 the night before, so we wouldn't get laughed out of a client review. I watched the oatmeal swirl toward the drain and thought, that's about right. 9 years of work. Rinsed clean. No residue left to prove it was ever there. Have you ever felt invisible like I have? I hope not. Maybe I should have a glass of warm water right now. It's still quite cold. I wonder what the temperature is where you live. And if you're still here, still listening, please leave your lucky number below so I know. My name is Molly Davis. I'm the Director of Systems Infrastructure. I've been at Coleman and Reed for 9 years. I don't sell strategy. I don't headline meetings. I prevent collapses. When servers fail, I rebuild them. When licensing exposure threatens regulatory penalties, I rewrite the compliance logic before legal even drafts the apology. When Jason promises timelines he doesn't understand, I stay until 2 in the morning to make sure reality catches up to his slides. Richard Coleman is the CEO. He believes in big plays. Jason Reed is his vice president of strategy. He believes in animation transitions. I believe in systems that don't break. That morning, during a strategic expansion meeting, I raised my hand and proposed a license risk management platform, automated cross-jurisdiction scanning, real-time alerts, something that would stop us from stepping into multi-million-dollar compliance traps. Richard didn't ask about the architecture, didn't ask about scalability. He smiled politely. We're focused on large strategic initiatives. Molly. Not small technical projects. Small. 9 years of stabilizing the foundation reduced to an extracurricular suggestion. Jason nodded thoughtfully, as if infrastructure were decorative. I sat back in my chair and folded my hands. I didn't argue. I didn't defend it. I just watched the meeting move forward without me again, like I was part of the furniture. Before we continue, I want to clarify something for you. The story you are about to hear is a blend of real-life workplace situations with fictional elements, using artificial intelligence to deepen the emotional experience and convey the message. I hope it will touch your heart. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, slipped into my inbox like it didn't belong there. The subject line was routine IP clarification, but the recipient list wasn't. My name had been added by mistake. I opened it without expectation. Amanda Blake, our general counsel, had written to Richard Coleman regarding my compliance platform. Her message was brief, clinical, almost bored. Molly's project does not fall under company IP scope. No action required. Below it, Richard replied just as efficiently, good, let her play. That was it. No follow-up, no inquiry into architecture, ownership, or future risk. Just 2 sentences dismissing months of my work as a harmless hobby. I didn't feel angry. I felt cold. For 9 years, I had operated inside systems built on documentation, audit trails, and legal precision. I understood what this meant. They had formally declined interest. They had acknowledged, in writing, that the project existed and that it wasn't theirs. One line, but legally. It was oxygen. I reread the thread twice to make sure I wasn't projecting meaning where there wasn't any. The language was clear. No IP claim, no internal filing, no request for review. They had looked at the door and chosen not to open it. So I did what I've always done. I documented. I saved the email in multiple encrypted folders. I forwarded a copy to my personal account. I printed the thread in color and grayscale. Then I contacted an intellectual property attorney and began the formal registration process under my own name. They thought they were ignoring me. What they'd actually done was set me free. Control doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like documentation. After the email from legal, I stopped hoping and started structuring. Every new build of the platform was logged with precise timestamps. I kept detailed Git commits tied to my personal repository, never once accessing company servers. Cloud hosting invoices were billed directly to my name and paid from my own account. I even recorded development sessions through screen captures stored offline, just in case someone later claimed collaborative overlap, if this ever became a dispute. I intended to win before the first argument was spoken. The software itself matured quickly. I refined the license risk engine, strengthened cross-jurisdiction logic, and stress-tested it against simulated regulatory audits. It flagged exposure within seconds. Clean, accurate, scalable. I wasn't building a prototype anymore. I was building leverage. Meanwhile, Jason announced in a strategy meeting that he was exploring a forward-looking compliance solution. He spoke confidently about innovation and future-proofing. Though he couldn't define AP, irate limits without glancing at his phone, Richard assigned him to research what he called the next-generation risk architecture. I didn't react. I didn't challenge the announcement. I took notes. They were building slides. I was building structure from where I sat. Their initiative resembled a house framed without foundation, impressive in photographs, unstable under pressure. If they wanted to experiment publicly, I had no reason to interrupt. My system wasn't theoretical. It worked. Control also means patience. One evening, after publishing a technical article on regulatory automation under my own name, I received a LinkedIn message from a managing partner at a fintech investment firm called Apex Horizon. He referenced specific elements of my architecture and asked if I'd consider a confidential discussion. I read the message twice. I hadn't pitched anyone. I hadn't advertised. But someone had noticed, for the first time in 9 years. The leverage I built quietly wasn't defensive. It was directional. I met Apex Horizon on a Thursday afternoon in a glass-walled office overlooking the river. No theatrics, no exaggerated enthusiasm. Just 3 people who had read my architecture line by line. The managing partner leaned forward and asked, "Did you build this entirely outside your employer's infrastructure?" "Yes," I replied. "Documented, time-stamped, independently hosted." He nodded once. "Good. Then we can talk seriously." I didn't offer to sell the platform outright. I wasn't desperate for an exit check. What I proposed was cleaner. "You're not buying my technology," I said evenly. "You're licensing usage rights and investing in the entity that owns it. I retain control. You gain scalable deployment." Silence followed. Not skeptical, evaluative. Their counsel asked about exposure, liabilities, potential IP challenges. I slid a folder across the table. Documentation, legal clarity, personal ownership trail. Every answer was precise. I had already rehearsed this conversation in my head for months. When the number surfaced, it didn't feel surreal. $150 million. Structured in stages, upfront capital, performance-based expansion payments, equity allocation tied to adoption metrics. Fully compliant, fully audited. Nothing reckless. The managing partner exhaled slowly. "That's a serious valuation. It's a serious system." I answered. By the second meeting, we had agreement in principle. By December, the contract was signed. CleanTrace would operate under a newly formed entity. I would lead architecture and maintain majority technical authority. Apex would handle capital infusion, scaling, and regulatory expansion. Richard knew nothing. He still believed I was maintaining infrastructure and quietly supporting Jason's half-formed initiatives. There was one clause I insisted on adding. Apex would retain the right to approach and service any enterprise client in need of regulatory automation, including my former employer's largest account. No exclusivity, no restrictions, just market access. I didn't smile when I signed. I didn't need to. If you believe negotiating equity instead of surrendering ownership was the right move, drop a 1 in the comments, because when you speak up, you don't just support a story, you reinforce the principle that strategy beats surrender every time. The holiday party felt exactly like every other year, too much artificial light. Not enough sincerity. I stood near the back of the ballroom with a glass of flat champagne, watching Richard Coleman raise his glass like a man accepting an award he'd already written for himself. To vision. He announced, to bold leadership, And to Jason, for driving our future strategy. Applause followed. Predictable. Jason smiled modestly. The way people do when they've practiced humility in the mirror. My name wasn't mentioned. It never was. 9 years of preventing regulatory disasters rarely translated into party toast. I felt nothing sharp. No anger, just clarity. This was the same dynamic, just wrapped in string lights and catered shrimp. A colleague from operations drifted over, half amused, half curious. So, Molly, he said lightly, whatever happened to that compliance app of yours? His tone suggested hobby, something quaint, something abandoned. I took a slow sip before answering. I sold it. He laughed. Come on, seriously, $150 million, I said calmly. No dramatic pause, no raised voice, just data for a second. The music felt distant, like someone had lowered the volume without touching the speakers. My colleague blinked twice, waiting for a punchline that didn't arrive. You're joking! I'm not. Behind him, I noticed movement. Richard had stopped mid-conversation. He wasn't facing me directly yet, but his posture shifted, shoulders stiffening, head turning slightly toward the sound of something unexpected. My colleague leaned closer. You actually sold it! Yes! The word carried no heat, no triumph, just fact. Across the room, Richard's eyes met mine, not fully understanding yet, but alert, calculating. The applause from earlier still echoed faintly in the room, but it no longer belonged to him. I set my glass down gently on the table. The storm hadn't started, but he'd just heard the thunder. Panic doesn't always shout. Sometimes it closes a door quietly and lowers its voice. Richard called me into his office the Monday after the holiday party. No assistant, no small talk, just a sharp. Close the door. Molly. I did. He didn't sit. That told me everything. Did you build that system while employed here? He asked. Yes. Did you use company resources? There it was. The angle. I placed a thick folder on his desk and slid it toward him. Personal laptop, independent cloud hosting, private repository, time-stamped Git logs, payment records in my name. He opened it, flipping through printed commits, invoices, and the internal legal thread from Amanda Blake. Richard's jaw tightened. We'll need legal to review this. She already did. I replied evenly, right on cue. Amanda entered. She had that composed, courtroom-neutral expression she wore when facts mattered more than feelings. She reviewed the documentation methodically, page by page, after several minutes. She closed the folder. The project falls outside company IP, she said. The prior internal correspondence confirms that management declined involvement. Richard's gaze snapped toward her. That was exploratory. It was documented, she corrected calmly. Silence thickened the room. Then he shifted tactics. You realize how this looks, selling a product developed while you were on our payroll. His voice sharpened. This borders on sabotage. I held his stare. Number 1, I said. You were offered visibility. You declined. You called it small. His lips pressed thin. He paced once behind his desk. You're harming this company. I prevented you from owning something you didn't value. Before he could respond, Amanda's phone buzzed. She glanced down. Then up. There's something else, she said carefully. An email notification had just arrived from Apex Horizon's legal department. Formal notice of deployment. CleanTrace would begin integration with their new enterprise partner, effective immediately. Richard leaned forward. Which partner? Amanda hesitated half a second. Our largest client. The silence this time wasn't controlled. It was rupture. Desperation has a different sound than confidence. It's sharper, less controlled. The emergency executive meeting was called the morning after Apex deployment notice. I wasn't invited as an employee. I was invited as a variable. Jason spoke first. This is actionable, he insisted, leaning forward like he was pitching a rescue plan. She built it while employed here. We sue, we file injunctions, we freeze distribution. I almost admired the performance. Amanda Blake didn't even open her laptop. On what grounds, she asked evenly. We have documented evidence declining IP interest. There's no shared infrastructure, no overlapping codebase, no internal ownership claim. Jason's jaw tightened. There has to be something. There isn't, Amanda replied. Richard shifted in his seat, recalibrating. Litigation was off the table. That left negotiation. He turned to me. What would it take for us to acquire CleanTrace, he asked. Voice measured now. We can structure a buyback, internalize it, protect everyone. Protect everyone. I met his gaze. You had that opportunity. Name a number. He pressed. The room felt smaller. Jason stared at me like I'd personally disrupted his 5-year roadmap. 3 times the current valuation. I said calmly. Richard blinked. That's unreasonable. It's market-based. I replied. And it reflects the strategic oversight. Silence stretched. Jason scoffed. You're leveraging one deployment? No, I said. I'm leveraging scalability. Richard leaned back. Calculating risk against pride? We won't pay that. I understand. There was no anger in my voice, just math. He folded his hands. Then we compete. I didn't correct him. Competing requires infrastructure. The meeting adjourned without resolution. As I stepped into the hallway, Amanda caught my eye, briefly neutral, but not unsympathetic. She knew what was coming. By late afternoon, the next email arrived. The subject line carried our largest client's name. They were conducting a formal review of all compliance frameworks and had elected to transition their risk management platform to CleanTrace. Citing greater automation depth and jurisdictional precision, Richard called an emergency follow-up within the hour. This time, no one mentioned lawsuits. No one mentioned buybacks. They were finally discussing survival, and for the first time in 9 years. I wasn't the one preventing the damage. I was the reason for it. The morning after, our largest client confirmed their transition to CleanTrace. Coleman and Reed's stock opened down 6%. By noon, it was 12. Analysts cited strategic oversight and unexpected competitive displacement. I watched the ticker from my kitchen table with a detached calm that surprised even me. Inside the company, the board moved quickly. An emergency session was scheduled. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. I knew the sequence. First, financial exposure. Second, accountability. Richard had framed my platform as a minor distraction. Now it was being referenced in shareholder calls as a missed asset opportunity. By late afternoon, another rupture surfaced. An internal email thread leaked to a financial blog. I recognized it immediately. Amanda's clarification about IP Richard's reply beneath it. Good. Let her play. 4 words. They read differently in public. Investors don't appreciate executives who dismiss innovation in writing. The narrative shifted overnight from competitive surprise to executive negligence. Richard attempted damage control. He sent a company-wide memo emphasizing innovation pipelines and collaborative culture. It sounded rehearsed, defensive. Too late. The board called him in for questioning. Why hadn't due diligence been conducted? Why was a senior infrastructure director's project not formally evaluated? Why had legal documentation explicitly declining review not triggered internal risk assessment? Richard's answers, I later learned, revolved around resource allocation and strategic focus. He positioned it as prioritization. The market interpreted it as blindness. Within 48 hours, a second client requested exploratory demos of CleanTrace. Apex's valuation estimates climbed. Meanwhile, Coleman and Reed's quarterly guidance was revised downward. Richard no longer controlled the story. The board did. Then came the final notice. An independent audit firm had been retained to evaluate executive decision-making processes, specifically surrounding innovation oversight and risk management failures. It wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed as governance. Still, everyone understood what it meant. For 9 years, I had quietly stabilized systems to prevent collapse. Now, watching from a distance, I saw what happens when leadership underestimates the foundation. The building doesn't fall immediately, It tilts first, and this time, I wasn't the one holding it upright. The board's decision was delivered on a Thursday morning under the language of corporate diplomacy. Richard Coleman would be placed on strategic leave pending review. The phrase sounded gentle, almost respectful. In reality, it meant he had been removed from operational authority. Jason followed within days. Officially, he was reassigned to a transitional innovation role. Unofficially, he no longer had a team, a budget, or a microphone. I read the internal update without satisfaction. Just a steady exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Amanda Blake remained. Legal stability mattered to the board, and she had documented everything. When we spoke briefly after the announcement, she said, "Governance isn't emotional, it's procedural." "I know," I replied. For 9 years, I had operated procedurally. The call from the board came the following week. The interim chair spoke carefully. "Molly, the company recognizes a missed opportunity. We'd like to discuss bringing you back Chief Operating Officer." There it was, the seat. It would have been poetic. The invisible infrastructure director elevated to executive control, a narrative arc investors love. I didn't answer immediately. What would that require, I asked. Integration of CleanTrace into our internal systems, leadership oversight, cultural reset. In other words, return and fix what they'd fractured. I appreciate the offer, I said evenly, but I'm not interested in returning as an employee. Silence, then recalibration. "You'd decline a C-suite position," the chair asked. Yes. I didn't need their title to validate what I had already built. 2 days later, another call came. "We'd like to retain you," the chair said, "as an independent strategic advisor, partner-level engagement, direct reporting to the board, no operational subordination." That was different. Not hired, not absorbed, contracted, on equal footing. I considered it carefully. CleanTrace remained autonomous. Apex retained expansion rights. My leverage was intact. "I'll review the terms," I said. When the formal proposal arrived, it positioned me as external counsel on innovation oversight and compliance modernization. For the first time in 9 years, the structure acknowledged what I had always been. Not support, not background. Strategic. Freedom feels quieter than revenge. The press release went live at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. Molly Davis, founder and lead architect of CleanTrace, secures $150 million strategic valuation. Clean, direct, accurate, no embellishment, no drama. My phone buzzed steadily as industry outlets picked it up. Analysts cited automation depth. Investors referenced scalability. My name was printed in bold across platforms that had never once mentioned my role at Coleman and Reed. Richard read it from his home office. I know because a former colleague texted me, "He's furious." There's no mention of him, not even a footnote. There wasn't. The article detailed architecture decisions, ownership structure, and regulatory foresight. It explained why CleanTrace mattered. It explained how it scaled. It never referenced the company that dismissed it. That omission said everything. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't post a triumphant caption. I reviewed the legal language one more time, confirmed valuation disclosures, and approved expansion timelines with Apex. I didn't destroy a company. I removed myself from propping it up. For 9 years, I prevented collapse. Then I stopped. I didn't destroy the company. I said softly to myself. I simply stopped saving it. There's something most of us learn, too late. Being indispensable is not the same as being valued. I spent 9 years proving my worth through quiet competence, assuming results would eventually speak for themselves. They don't, at least not in rooms where volume is confused with vision. What saved me wasn't anger or revenge. It was documentation, ownership, and timing. It was understanding that if I didn't define the value of my work, someone else would minimize it for me. This story isn't about a payout. It's about boundaries. About recognizing when loyalty becomes self-erasure. About realizing that you can be professional without being passive. If you were in my position, overlooked, dismissed, Labeled reliable, but never respected. What would you build? Would you keep waiting? Or would you quietly start designing your own leverage? I didn't win because I fought louder. I won because I prepared better. Where are you listening from right now? I'm genuinely curious. Different cities, different industries, but the same quiet struggle happens everywhere. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing. One subscription helps stories like this reach someone who's still doubting their value. A like or a share might push this video into the feed of a person who needs proof that strategy beats resentment. When you comment, you're not just reacting, you're helping amplify a lesson about ownership and courage. You're not just watching, you're helping someone else see what they're worth. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.